At the time of this story, I was 21 and living in a major Midwestern city. Attending the university there, having lived there for only 1 month before my story began, I had witnessed a train stop stabbing, been yelled at by a crackhead, had a homeless guy follow me, and threatened to choke me outside the physics building on campus, and watched a 13-car cooperate on a drug house just across the street. The area around the university is known for being rough and has a notoriously high crime rate. We would get a few texts a week from the campus police saying things like there'd been a robbery, a break-in, an assault, stalkings, attempted kidnappings. I could go on. I always ignored these texts, thinking foolishly that I would never be a victim, because I was smart enough to stay out of trouble, not go out alone late at night. All the cliches. I seriously regret this behavior now, and to anyone listening to this, please never think that you're 100 safe. No matter your level of preparedness, always do your best to stay observant and careful. The first incident wasn't too unusual. I was just a block or two from my apartment building one day in the early evening. It was still light outside. I was walking my dog Sesame, a cute Shiba Inu who looks just like a fluffy, goofy puppy and has never been frightening or particularly protective in his life. As I was heading back home, I passed a small parking lot, and in it, a large van. I could see a man in his early 60s. Sitting in the driver's seat, smoking a cigarette. He was staring at me. As I passed, he actually leaned out of his car and called out to me, "Hey, you there. That's a cute dog. What's his name?" I should mention this isn't even my first story like this. I have a pretty intense fear of strangers and actually struggle with PTSD from other incidents in my life. Being pretty wary for this reason, I ignored him and just walked faster. I heard a car door shut behind me and turned quickly to see that he'd gotten out of his van and was now slowly walking toward me. He called out to me again, "Hey, baby, I just want to see your dog. Come back." His phrasing pissed me off, and I gripped my dog's leash and started to speed walk away from him, starting to feel nervous. My heart was beginning to pound, but I kept telling myself over and over that I was overreacting and it was just my paranoia acting up. There was nothing to worry about. Boy, was I wrong. I managed to turn the corner and was about to cross the final park before getting to my apartment. In my fear over the van guy, I wasn't paying attention, as I usually do, to what was in front of me. I looked back over my shoulder and the guy had stopped following me. He was, however, standing in the middle of the sidewalk with a huge creepy grin on his face. I whirled back around with my eyes glued to my building. I only needed to walk another half a block and then I'd be home. I was gonna get away from him and his creepy van just when I thought I was safe. A group of 5 or 6 men came from the side of the park. I wasn't watching. They were all tall and intimidating in stature, and all of them were laughing and looking right at me out of the corner of my eye. The van guy had started walking toward me as well. I remember his whistling. I again picked up my pace and desperately searched for my keys in my pocket as I hurried to the door. The group of men then veered toward me, partially cutting me off, and in all my stupid politeness, I stopped. They grinded me with sick, perverted smiles, obviously checking me out, looking up and down my body. It made me feel sick. I tried not to panic and inched closer to my apartment. "Hey, what's your name? Where are you going? What's your Snapchat? Is that your apartment? Can we come over? Do you smoke?" They all barraged me with questions, one after another. I tried refusing them, stammering no, "Thank you," as I saw the van guy come and join their group, leering at me. While I inched away, they inched closer. One of them then reached out for me, his fingers actually touching my arm. I leapt back, trying not to start crying. But Sesame lunged at them, his teeth bared, a horrifying snarl ripping from his throat. Every bit of Qteshiba personality was gone. He looked like he wanted to tear one of the guys' throats out. It startled them enough that I was able to turn and spread the final distance to my building. Locking the door behind me, I fell to the floor inside my building, hugging Sesame. However, the entire front of my building was glass, and to my horror and disbelief, the group of men came and stood in front of the windows, grinning at me, laughing and making kissy faces and loot gestures at me. The apartment manager came out and called the cops, but they ran away. I made it back home and scrubbed myself in the shower, crying and shaking with fear. Sesame got a special dinner that evening, and I kept telling myself they just wanted to mess with me. I was never in any real danger. Stupid of me, I know now. About a month later, when I finally managed to be able to walk outside my apartment without severe anxiety, I was Actually planning on moving a bit farther away from campus. It was still going to be in a sketchy neighborhood, but the thought of those men knowing where I lived kept me up at night. My apartment actually hired a security guard to be there 24/7. After someone had broken into the building, smashed all the windows, destroyed some of the furniture, and stormed a bunch of bikes. Of course, my bike got stolen. Anyways, I was heading home from class, and it was a beautiful day. I actually felt pretty happy for once. And popped my earbuds in the last few blocks before I got home. Stupid, I know. After a block or so, I started to feel like someone was watching me. My palms started sweating. I glanced behind me, trying not to look obvious, and the man was about 20 feet behind me, staring straight at me. I snapped my head back around and ripped out my earbuds. No, 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 I thought it can't be one of them. I was just jumping to conclusions given my anxiety disorder and paranoia shortly. But there was something familiar about him. My heart started racing as I hoped to God there weren't others waiting for me around the corner of my building ready to jump on me. I walked faster, wishing Sesame was with me. I was too afraid to look back at him as I fumbled with my keys and wrenched the door open as hard as I could. This turned out to be a crucial mistake. As I ran to the elevator trying to breathe a sigh of relief, I saw with absolute horror that the man had caught the door, had thrown wide open, and was slowly coming into the building with me. He paused, standing away from me, but close enough that I could hear his ragged breathing and smell alcohol coming off of him. My heart was thudding in my chest now, and I struggled to think clearly. The apartment manager was already home for the day, and I was completely alone in the lobby. There were no other doors out of that room, and the stranger was blocking my way to the door. The security guard was supposed to be keeping an eye on the building, but he was nowhere to be seen. The elevator came, and I tried to run into it and slam my hand over the closed door button as fast as I could. I pushed my floor's button and huddled in the far corner of the elevator. I started to once again try to catch my breath, but right when the door was almost closed, he stuck his hand in. I couldn't believe it. He waited until the door was just about to close, and then he stopped it. He was standing close enough that there was no way that that was a mistake. My stomach dropped and suffocating sense of dread crept in. I kept my head down as he joined me. My desperate hope that he was just a dirty, drunken resident of the building was washed down when he didn't press any buttons. I don't know why I didn't run out of the elevator or tried to leave the building again. I was paralyzed with fear. All I could do was watch as the doors closed and sealed my fate. The elevator was filled with a stench of alcohol, and if I wasn't so terrified, I might have gagged. It was nauseating. I couldn't look at him. I couldn't move. I tried to scream at myself in my head to press the wrong button and try to escape him, but I was completely petrified. He leaned closer to me, and I heard him breathe in deeply. A very quiet sigh, like he was content. I felt tears well in my eyes, and the seconds it took to reach the top floor where I lived felt like hours. I saw no way I could escape the sick, drunken guy who was smelling me. In the reflection of the elevator walls, I could make out his disgusting smile. He was staring directly at me, his hands in his pockets, clearly holding on to something. I'm not religious, but I prayed that I would make it to my door in time. I realized he probably wasn't going to attack me in the elevator. There was a large camera in the ceiling. I looked up at it, feeling a tear spill out of my eye as I did so, hoping that whoever saw the tape eventually would identify this man. The worst part of all of this is that I've trained in martial arts and self-defense since I was 8 years old. I thought of myself as stronger and braver than I was acting, and I should know what to do. I should be strong enough to do it, but no matter how many times I had disarmed, thrown, or choked out attackers in the studio, nothing totally prepares you for the dread of a real-life situation. As the elevator reached my floor, I managed to snap out of my stupor long enough to dash through the door and run into my apartment unit. I nearly missed the keyhole, but I threw open my door. I was nearly through when my backpack snagged on the outside handle of the door, trapping me. I heard the man quickly walking to my door, a low chuckle building in his throat as he watched me panic and struggled to get free. I felt like a mouse being watched by a cat. Trapped in, helpless, so close to escaping. I finally gave up and shoved my arms through the straps, abandoning my backpack. As I did so, the man suddenly reached out for me. I was able to slam the door shut, deadbolting it. The gust of air from the door slamming brought his disgusting smell in with me, and in my terror and disgust I retched violently. I looked through the people. He was staring right at me, pressing his forehead against the door, his mouth bent in the furious scowl. He swore at me and ripped my backpack off the handle, slamming it to the ground. I winced as I heard my laptop third. I was still too terrified to say anything. But I grabbed the knife I kept by my door in my hand, ready if he tried anything. After a few minutes of staring at my door, jiggling the handle, licking the people, and making obscene motions at it, he unzipped my backpack, dumping its contents on the floor. He picked up my back, sniffing it and layering at the people as he did so. It was like he knew I was watching him. I couldn't look away again, paralyzed in fear. Finally, he left using the elevator. Visible from my door like nothing had happened, I continued to stare out the people for what felt like an eternity, and then finally called the apartment manager, feeling my anger sinking in that. The security guard hadn't been anywhere in sight, not paying any attention. It turns out he'd fallen asleep eating Taco Bell and watching movies on his phone. He was only 10 feet away from the elevator the entire time, sleeping in the office behind a closed door. They fired him, but the creepy guy was never caught, and neither were any of the others. I don't even know for sure if this man was a part of the original group. I was honestly too terrified to look much at their faces during the first incident. I moved out of my apartment a week later, staying with my boyfriend at the time for the remainder of my lease. I kept Sesame with me at all times when possible. A few more things happened while I lived in that city, from having to call in a gunfight from outside my new apartment window to having to pick up my friend who was being followed by a van to having to evacuate during an arson incident. There are nice things about the city too, but during my time there, besides learning the police department was absolutely useless and corrupt, to nearly escaping with my life multiple times, I couldn't be happier to be far, far away from there, and I'm doing a lot better with my fear and anxiety. It was fall 2017, I was 18 and starting my freshman year. Had a huge university 8 hours away from my home. Quite a lot was going on in my life, as this was the first time ever moving cities, and my first time living parent-free after 18 years of living with limited independence in a strict household. I was going through all the wacky culture shock and mental and emotional changes that most college freshmen go through within the first few days of moving onto campus. This was the very first day of classes. After my last class, I stopped by a food court to pick up something to eat. I was too hungry to wait to get back to my dorm, so I sat alone at a bench in a courtyard between two buildings and started to eat. Yes, I know walking and eating alone was probably a really stupid idea, but I was naive as hell and figured that at a huge college campus, I would only be surrounded by other lost, confused students like me. I also had no friends since I moved to the city, not knowing a single person. My raging social anxiety made me hesitant to try meeting new people. Anyway, I was alone on a bench eating my food when an odd-looking couple approached me. A tall, muscular, bald man and a petite, Latina Asian-looking woman with glasses and a bob-style haircut who was holding a few books. The man was completely silent, but the woman enthusiastically approached me. She introduced herself as Carmen in an ambiguous accent. She didn't even introduce the man, and he just stood there silently. She started asking me stuff: my name, year, where I was from, what I was majoring in, before telling me she was from a Bible study group here in the city that a lot of college students find interest in. She opened the Bible and started reading me some random passage before explaining it and continuing to talk more about this group. She asked if I'd be interested, and I quickly shut her down by explaining that I had no time in my schedule with my classes. I took my phone out of my pocket to check the time. I made up some weird, ridiculous lie I can't remember about how I had to leave immediately. She snatched my phone from me and said, "Wait, before you leave, I'm going to give you my contact information so you can let me know later if you're still interested." She proceeded to put her number in my contacts. As I said, I was deep in culture shock of the whole brand new college freshman experience. I was terribly shy, and I didn't have the confidence to be assertive in this kind of situation. I just let her do her thing. She gave me my phone back, and I headed back to my dorm. I approached my dorm and realized I didn't have my keys or wallet, even though I saw I was holding them at the time the couple had approached me. I frantically ran back to the bench area and searched it thoroughly. I went through my backpack. I even checked the nearby trash can. Nothing. I couldn't get into my dorm without my keys or ID, so I crumbled to the ground crying and calling my dad in a panic. This was my first time ever losing my case or wallet in public. Days after Moving to a new city, and for an insecure 18-year-old it felt like my life was over. My dad could only do so much from 8 hours away, so he instructed me to call the campus police. I did, and an officer arrived and asked me for details of where I was, what my things look like, that kind of thing. I didn't mention the odd Bible study coupled to him at all, because I was in such a panic. I didn't think to consider that they might have had any involvement or any way of reaching my things out of my backpack. I still feel incredibly stupid for not providing the details. The officer gave me temporary dorm access and instructed me to call the police department daily to check if any missing items had turned up. I was overcome with relief when I received an email 2 to 3 days later that was from Ra in a dorm halfway across the campus, saying that my keys and wallet were turned into their lost and found. I never saw that couple around campus again. I avoided going to places alone other than class. A few months later, I was scrolling through social media to see multiple posts about an ongoing sex trafficking ring in the area that would target college students by introducing themselves as Bible study groups. My stomach dropped. It sounded way too similar to the couple that approached me before my belongings mysteriously disappeared 3 years later. I still feel like an utter and complete idiot for being more freaked out over my missing things more than the encounter of two strangers. This happened to me 2 weeks ago. I work at a small coffee stand with only a drive-through window and a walk-up window in a sketchy area. On the closing shift, we only have 2 people working, so it was me and my coworker. At around 10 p.m., this woman comes up and walks up to the window with a little dog. She asks if she can sit on our bench outside. We tell her sure, and she goes and sits down. About 10 minutes later, she comes back up and knocks on the window. She's looking visibly distressed and has tears running down her face. She tells us that she lives in a big city about 4 hours away, that she's totaled her car nearby, and asks if one of us can give her a ride to a large bus station about 20 minutes away. My coworker and I believe her story, but we don't feel comfortable giving a stranger a ride. We tell her that we just can't clock off and leave in the middle of our shift, and she asks how much longer we have to go. My coworker lies and says 2 hours and hopes she will figure something out on her own or move on. She goes back to the bench to sit down. Another 10 to 15 minutes pass, and she comes knocking again, asking a second time for a ride, saying she doesn't feel safe in the area alone at night. She said that she tried to get an Uber, but that she only has cash and they wouldn't let her pay with cash. I tell her she should call a cab and pay with cash. She says they're pretty expensive at this point. We were getting worried she was gonna hang around until we lock up and leave. I text my friend who's on shift as a cop in the city, asking if there was a way we could safely help her get out of the area. He gets another officer on shift to drive out and offer her a ride. He tells me not to promise her anyone is coming, as he isn't sure how long it's going to take his buddy to get out there, or if he'll get dispatched to a bigger call along the way. About 5 minutes before close, she knocks again and asks for a ride. I tell her we're trying to work out if an officer can escort her, but that I'm not sure if they can come yet or not, as they are really short-staffed in our city. I also tell her that worst-case scenario, there's a city bus stop about a block down the street. She seems hopeful about a cop possibly coming and returns to the bench. It hits 11 p.m. and we close and lock the windows. She comes up again and asks if I can just call her a cab. I call a cab and tell them our coffee shop's address and that a woman needs a ride to the larger bus station downtown. The cab dispatcher tells me that the bus station got turned into a homeless shelter, but that they can drop her off at one of the bus stops for that bus line. I go back to the window and tell the woman the cab is on the way. She asks how much the cab would be. I tell her they didn't say, and then I ask how much she has. She doesn't respond. A snack from my bag and a treat for her dog, and we finish up our closing chores. We go to leave, and as we set the alarm and lock the door, we hear her knocking at the window again, but then she walks over to us at the door. She seems really scared and asks if we're leaving. I tell her that we have to go, but a cab will be there soon and that she'll be okay. She says she doesn't feel safe and points out a white truck parked on the street next to us with its lights on. She says there's someone in that car and that she doesn't feel safe waiting alone. I reassure her she'll be okay and remind her that she's got her phone. She can call the police if she feels unsafe. My coworker and I get into my car and discuss what to do next. We felt sympathy for her and believed her, but we also don't know if she's associated with whoever is in the truck or not. If we sit in my car in the lot and wait For the cab to come, she'll likely start coming up to us at my car. Neither of us had bad gut feelings, but the situation was sketchy and we didn't want to take any chances. We left and decided to circle the block to see if she would stay there, leave, or get into the truck. When we get back around the block, she's gone. I turn to start driving my coworker home and we see her sitting outside the gas station. I'm not sure if she ever went back to get the cab or not. I wonder if she decided to wait there to ask people getting gas for a ride, or if she was trying to get away from the person in the truck she was creeped out by. I feel really bad for her situation and guilty that I couldn't do more to help her, but I feel like anything else I could have done wouldn't have been safe to do. My cop friend reminded me that you never know what people's intentions are or not. And at the end of the day, she's an adult and will figure something out. This kind of scares the __ out of me. I moved to Denton about a year and a half ago. I was always told it's a pretty safe place. I felt the same when I lived in my first house. When I moved to my new place, I didn't think it would be much different. Actually, I thought it would be safer, since in my last place my roommates never, and I mean never, locked the doors. In the new place I have a roommate and a big dog, so that makes me feel safer. We live in a good area, there are families around and stuff, but since I've moved here there have been 4 different instances where men have come to my house and done something strange. All have occurred at night from 9 p.m. to 3 a.m. Not one has done the same thing. The first one happened about a month into us living there. It was 3 a.m. and the doorbell rang. Who the would be at my door right now? As I'm walking to the door, I can see and hear the person trying to get in. Me terrified, I look through the people and see the silhouette of the guy that looks like my roommate's ex. I wake her up and tell her. She opens the door a few minutes later, and the guy isn't there anymore. She peeps her head outside the door and sees the same guy inside my car. She yelled out to him and he sprinted away. The second time, it's 9 p.m. and I'm home alone. Someone rings the door. My lazy ass didn't get up to get it. A couple of minutes later the door rings again. This time I get up and no one's set the door. I open it and see 2 men in an SUV pulling into my driveway. They're almost all the way up to the house. Once they see me, they stopped the car, put it in reverse, and laughed. I don't know what they wanted or were gonna do, but it was weird. Here's the third thing that happened. One night my roommate is home alone. It's about 9:30 p.m. and the door rings. She doesn't get it, thinking it must be her Amazon package. They will just leave it at the door. The door rings again. Confused, she gets up and looks through the people. There's a guy with a black ball cap on looking down, so she can't see his face. Can I help you? She asks. I have your Amazon package. Okay, do I need to sign anything? He says no. Okay, you can just leave it on the ground. He ends up just standing there for a minute or so. She nervously stares back at him through the people, waiting for him to walk away. He eventually walks away. For about an hour after that, our big ass dog keeps growling at the door. Another weird thing is that Amazon stops delivering at 9 p.m. Maybe he was just running late. The fourth and last thing that happened is definitely the creepiest. This happened last month at around 1:30 am. I wasn't home, but my roommate was with her new boyfriend Alex. They're in bed, and from the corner of Alex's eye he sees a pair of eyes in the cracks from the blinds from her window. He gets up and runs outside, sees a grown-ass man in a construction vest looking through her window. The guy jumps when he sees Alex and grabs our trash cans right next to her window. He pretends to just be a trash guy, kindly taking our empty trash cans out for us. I didn't know they had night shifts now on Fridays. So yeah, those are my stories. I've heard there's a man the DPD are looking for. He's forcing himself into women's apartments in Denton. It's sad that I have to live in fear because I'm a target. Being a woman, it may sound dramatic to many, but after all these experiences I've had, on top of this guy that's been named a serial offender on the loose, I'm terrified to live alone next semester. I've never been scared of that. I'm a pretty tall, heavier woman, and I've grown up with all brothers. I thought I knew how to fight, but now I think, could I even help myself? I'm generally a calm, collected person, but this gives me anxiety every time I'm home alone and I hear something. Well, anyway, thanks for listening to my stories. If you have experienced anything like this and are from around here, let me know that I'm not alone. For a little over 5 years, I've lived in a college town in southern Indiana. When I first moved here, my at-the-time girlfriend and I were both working in fast food, so we lived in an Embarrassingly small apartment in a dingy and unsettling building. One night we had a run-in with someone that shook us so deeply we started looking for a new apartment that very night. First I should explain the building a little. We lived on the ground floor. The halls were in the shape of a giant T with exits at the ends of 2 of the 3 sides. The third side housed the community washer and dryer directly across from our door. Our usual route in and out of the building was to take the main door, walk the 30 to 35 feet to the T, and go left all the way to the end when standing right outside our door was when the halls looked most unsettling, as it was a straight shot of maybe 70 feet to the other exit. The walls were yellowish stained white, with sterile harsh overhead lights and plain brown doors with little peepholes lining both sides. It was generally uninviting. We were aware that the surrounding community was just a little sketchy given its reputation and a handful of stories we'd heard, so when the trash needed taking out, the duty fell onto me. I didn't mind. I'm a big guy, 6'1" and about 300 pounds with a fair amount of muscle, but taking out the trash at night always gave me the creeps anyway. In our year of living there, I'd only ever seen 2 of our neighbors. One at the opposite end of the hall, who more often than not resembled a blur as they hurriedly closed and locked their door before slipping out the exit, and a surprisingly nice college-aged guy across from us. Getting comfortable in that building feels like a mistake now looking back. 6 or so months into living there, the trash had gotten full. Later at night while cooking dinner, my girlfriend said, "I'll get the tacos ready, you run the trash out." I absolutely despised walking down that nightmare of a hallway into the darkness. But at the promise of tacos, I slipped my flip-flops on and stepped out into the hallway with the bag. I closed the door behind me, and when I looked up my heart stopped. At the other end of the hallway stood a large man. He didn't look very heavy, but he was certainly taller than me. He wore a large coat over a hoodie and sweatpants. He was standing perfectly centered with the exit at the end of the hall, shoulders squared, staring directly at me. I thought to myself, well, that's pretty weird, but surely it's nothing. I tried to avoid eye contact as I walked toward him, taking the right turn out the main exit as I usually would. I took maybe 15 steps, hurled the back into the dumpster, and turned to find the man standing directly inside the door, staring at me through the large glass pane. I froze. I'm gonna get stabbed, I thought to myself. I had no idea why this man would be interested in me, but now he was blocking my only sensible re-entry, unless I wanted to dive through my living room window. I swallowed my fear and walked toward the door. As I neared, he opened it for me. "Oh, you're coming out." I instinctively grabbed the door and stepped to the side for him to leave. "No," he said. We stood there for a second, staring each other down uncomfortably. "Okay," I said, forcing an insincere smile. I slipped past him and started walking down the hall. To clarify, it didn't seem like there was anything wrong with this man. He didn't seem at this point to be on drugs, or really anything that I could chalk this weird behavior up to. I'd almost made it to the turn at the end of the hall when I heard him say, "Hey," from behind me. He'd followed me just a few steps. "I'm waiting for my friend in 15. She said she'd be here in about 10 minutes. Do you mind if I wait in your apartment with you?" My heart started racing again. I don't know what he wanted, but he was not getting it. "Oh, I don't know, man. My girlfriend is kind of weird about strangers, and I'm sure you're not bothering anyone out here," I said, trying to sound like I wasn't freaking the hell out. On the inside, silence for a couple of minutes. "What's your girlfriend's name?" "I think I know her," he said flatly. At this point, I was physically tensing, preparing to fight this guy off if I needed to. I think my discomfort was beginning to show on my face. Against my better judgment, I said only her first name, almost as a test. "Ashley," he responded immediately with, "Oh yeah, I know her. She's friends with my friend in number 15. That wasn't true. I knew that wasn't true. We'd never met. Whoever lived in that apartment. I decided that it was just best to go. Even if it meant upsetting this guy. I just started walking to the apartment. "Well, I'll see you later, dude. Don't worry, you aren't gonna upset anyone by chilling out here. Have a good night," I said, picking up speed until I was practically running for the front door. I made my way inside and locked it behind me, the panic plain on my face. "What's wrong?" Ashley asked. I looked out the people and whispered, "I just ran into the weirdest guy," and I started explaining what had happened. Halfway through my explanation, I heard a loud bang on our door. We both jumped and Ashley let out a Little noise, I looked through the people again, and to my shock and absolute horror the man was standing right outside our door, staring into the people only inches away. I could see him mouthing something, but I couldn't tell what. I grabbed the kitchen knife and mouthed for Ashley to call the police. She did and handed the phone to me. I began explaining what had and what was currently happening. They asked me to describe what he was wearing, but I was drawing a blank, so I looked through the people again to see. My heart once again stopped. I couldn't see anything. It was pitch black. I told the officer, and they rushed someone out just in case this man meant us harm. Almost half an hour later things were quiet until there was a knock at the door. A police officer made himself known, so I opened it. I could then tell why I couldn't see anything. The man had climbed on top of the dryer, taken down the panel in the ceiling, and taken the bulbs out of the fixture in front of our door. They said they'd searched the entire property and found no sign of anyone that didn't belong there. Now my wife and I live in a much better, safer community. And I still always wear my gun when I take out the trash. Part 2. This occurred about 5 years ago when I was back home for a short while from college. A few friends and I had gone to see a movie. I stayed behind a little while longer, talking to one of my close friends I hadn't seen in a while, standing by my car in a mostly empty parking lot outside of the theater. All of a sudden, a random guy showed up, standing near the other end of my car. He appeared to be in his early 20s. Though I can't say for sure since it was dark. He never said anything. He just stood there, occasionally looking at his phone and slowly inching closer. Then an SUV pulled up behind us. This was absolutely terrifying. As we were right in between them, the driver asked the guy if he needed a ride, and he said no. The SUV slowly pulled away. We continued to chat for a second, but I could tell we were both pretty spooked, so we cut the conversation off immediately after. My friend quickly walked back to his car a short distance away while this stranger hovered close to my car. I hurriedly got in. When he knocked on the window, I opened the window just a crack. He then asked me for a ride. I immediately knew something was very wrong. He just turned down a ride from someone who he seemed to know, and then he asked for a ride from a total stranger. I didn't even bother trying to come up with an excuse. I just told him no and threw it in reverse and sped off. As I drove off, I did feel a twinge of doubt. Maybe he really did need a ride, and now I'm a huge __ for leaving him alone in the parking lot. I just brushed it off. When I got home, I messaged my friend about how weird everything about that seemed. I told him about the guy asking for a ride. He then informed me that he saw the guy get out of that same SUV moments before he walked up to us. Apparently, the SUV dropped him off closer to the front of the parking lot, and then he waited for him to walk up to us before driving up and offering him a ride. I don't know what he intended to do, but it was definitely a setup. Back in my senior year of high school, I worked at my town's local movie theater. Every week when schedules were posted, they were placed in the box office for staff to grab. There were two problems with this. The schedules were easy to reach, meaning anyone could reach their hand behind the glass window inside and grab one. The other problem is that they listed each employee's phone number next to their name on the schedule. This is where my story comes into play. We had a ton of employees always coming and going, so you did not necessarily need to be dressed in a uniform to grab a schedule. I don't know how long it took for me to notice the grip. I am kind of oblivious when I'm focused on my work. I think the first time I really noticed him was when I was cleaning a theater by myself. Everyone had left the theater, or so I thought, and so I turned on the overhead lights to see better. I was minding my own business when a creepy man comes up from behind me and just stands. It scares the hell out of me when I turn around and just see him there staring at me. He then says, "Hi Megan," and leaves the theater. After that, I began seeing him every single time I worked, and for my entire shift. If I worked a 12-hour shift, he would be there the whole 12 hours watching movies and watching me. Things started to get real creepy when I started getting random texts from a stranger. He basically would tell me he was watching me at work and that I was beautiful and he was going to be with me someday. Me being the overly nice person I basically apologized for not reciprocating his feelings and telling him I don't know who he is and to please stop texting me. So a few days later, Creepo shows back up at my work. He tells me he's the one who's been texting me. I asked how he got my number and he said, "The schedule, of course, okay." Immediately, I found my manager and I asked her to remove my phone number from the schedule. I then promptly blocked his phone number. Phil, that's over with. Well, no, not really. Homeboy starts leaving notes and flowers on my car asking why I blocked his number and if he could take me out. Mind you, this man is like 30 years older than me, so I'm like, no dude. I just kind of threw everything away that he left on my car and I didn't pay much attention. He starts to get the guts to approach me after work when he knew I was walking to my car alone and harasses me, so now I have my manager start walking me out at night. That just infuriates him more. So basically the tip of the iceberg was, one night I was walked out by a manager. It's like 1 a.m. and the creep starts running at us and tries to attack my manager. Cue me screaming my head off trying to call 911 while my manager is on the ground wrestling this guy. He ends up getting arrested. I get my phone number changed and I honestly don't know what happened to him. After that I moved shortly after for college, but I wasn't too worried about Mr. Creepy finding me ever again. But let me tell you, that made me so much more aware of my surroundings and the people around me. Pepper spray is now my favorite accessory. So this happened when I was 14. I was a small, pudgy little white kid living in the city of Chicago. It was summer and I decided that I would go see a movie. I didn't have anyone to go with, so I went alone. I get to the movie theater, pay for my ticket and walk to the theater. Looking back, I don't remember the movie. But that's not important. Anyway, I walk into the theater before the previews start and find it completely empty except for one guy. He's sitting fairly close to the screen and off to the left. I take my seat right in the center. As I sit down, I remembered seeing the guy turn back and look at me a few times. I only saw it from my peripherals, but it seemed fairly normal. The lights in the theater go down and the previews start. Halfway through the second preview, the guy stands up and starts walking out of the theater, and except he doesn't, he stops at the row right in front of mine and walks down it, taking a seat directly in front of me. This would have been weird enough, but then I started to hear whimpering. I could hear and see him crying. Then out of nowhere he jerks his whole body around and just starts absolutely sobbing, and I mean bawling. He starts grabbing my knee and saying, "I'm sorry, oh God, I'm so sorry." At this point I'm tweaking balls and all I can think to say is it's okay. But he just kept right on crying and apologizing. Finally, I figured the man had some serious mental issues and needed to get out of there. I mustered up the courage to stand up. But he was clutching onto me still. I literally had to pry his fingers open so that he would let go of my pants leg. I guess it's worth mentioning that his hands were soaking wet from wiping tears away and snot. When I finally got him off, he just kind of fell to the ground and kept on crying. I sprinted to the ticket box and found a manager. I told him what had happened and he just looked at me like I was crazy. Finally, I convinced him to go check it out. About 10 minutes later, he walked out with the man. He was still crying hysterically. When he saw me, he just started apologizing again. The manager came back and offered to let me see another movie for free, but all I wanted was to go home. The thing that still really messes with me many years later is the image of this middle-aged man looking right into my eyes as he went through something very traumatic. I never saw him again, thankfully. In the end, I kind of just want to know what he was so sorry about. I decided to take my 2 children to go see a Sunday matinee at the movie theater. Secret Life of Pets 2 is nearly out of the theaters, so we decided that would be our best bet to beat the crowds. We went to the 11:55 am showing and stepped in a bit late to find we had the theater all to ourselves. My kids were thrilled. Since the movie is older, it was in a room in the very back of the building, far away from anyone or other rooms. The previews were still rolling when a man, I would say in his late 50s, stepped into the room. He immediately started looking my way as he walked to the row behind me and proceeded to sit down directly behind me, literally the seat and row right behind when the entire theater was empty. Now, I know adults can sometimes want to go to a children's movie alone. I realized that alone doesn't make him creepy. However, my good instinct was that this is very bizarre. Toy Story or Lion King, sure, I would understand him being there. This is a very obscure movie, and it's a sequel. Beyond that, why would anyone sit right behind me, knowing it might look odd that they're even present at this movie in the morning on a Sunday? I immediately got up. I moved to the other side of my children and turned so I was facing him. He looked extremely uncomfortable since entering the theater and was very fidgety. His foot was tapping, and I quickly snapped a picture of my kids with the camera focused in on it. I moved my daughter to my lap so she was out of his reach and was racking my brain on my next move. I was in the very back of this building, with the sound blasting, and I had two small children with me alone in a huge room with one door leading out with this stranger. This guy was obviously a creep, you could just tell by his behavior and body language. I thought about complaining to management, but what was I even gonna say? I mean, technically he has every right to be there, so I just kept my eyes on him. The movie started, and he watched for a moment, glancing my way and at the screen. Repeatedly, with his legs still bouncing nervously, I started to form an exit plan in my mind. A minute or two into the film, he got up and hurriedly raced toward the door. I waited a few, hoping he wouldn't return, and he didn't. I'm sure I was making him uncomfortable, turned and looking his way, but all I could think was, why would he sit directly behind me in this huge theater room I wasn't even in? The center of the theater, and my placement with the kids was very random. It was not an ideal spot to sit. He could have grabbed me from behind and ran with my kids. He could have been a pervert who wanted to take care of himself. He never returned, but I'll never forget what he looked like. As we left, I stopped by the information to speak with the manager and another employee. The first thing they said after I showed him his picture and pausing was, there were only 3 tickets sold to this movie, and we don't recognize him as someone who was at one of the other movies. Either those 3 tickets were for me and my children. The theater complex was completely dead. He had to walk by literally every other movie in this huge complex to get to the room this one was in. It was late morning, and literally most of the other movies all started at this time. Trust your instincts, even if you offend someone. I've learned the hard way, you have to go with your gut. I don't know what could have happened that day, but I still have the chills thinking about it. It could have been someone movie hopping, but many other films started at that time. His choice and nervousness tells me otherwise. The weekend after my 24th birthday, I went on a blind date that ended atrociously, as the person I met smelled like a skunk and was a liar. That's not the scary part, though. I bought a ticket for my date and myself, but the movie didn't start for another 45 minutes. I just waited in the theater lobby until she would show up. I was on the far left corner of a bench when a large burly man walked up to the bench and sat directly next to me. "Hi," he said, as a slightly awkward guy I sheepishly said, "I." The man smiled, opened up his coat, reached in and pulled out a package of salami. "This is the best salami you want to buy some?" he asked. "No thanks, I'm full," I said. He raised his eyebrows and put the salami back in his coat. In the same movement, however, he pulled out a package of cheese. "And this cheese you want to buy some pepper jack?" He leaned towards me with his question. "No, I'm afraid not." He sighed, put the cheese back in his coat, and zipped it up. The man was silent for the next 5 minutes, but my heart was pounding from being uncomfortable. The man finally relented and nudged me. He pointed at the poster for Mockingjay. "That's a fine-ass logo." He smirked. I looked at the poster. "It is pretty cool, isn't it?" I forced myself to say, "I'm a tattoo artist, I gotta put it on." "Someone, maybe you, yeah, I would love to ink your canvas. I mean, you are well built, one could do wonders with your skin." I went wide-eyed in dismay at how creepy this guy was. I couldn't even respond at this point. "I'm also a musician. I bet you have great vocal cords. I'd love to audition you." He smiled at me. "Maybe another time." "There, I'm meeting my date any second now," I said. "Is she hot?" he said, with his tongue deeper and more serious. "I don't know, we'll see," I replied. "Well, lucky her," he said. He reached out and stroked my hairline and ran his finger through my admittedly long hair. "Lucky her." I sprang to my feet and stomped out of the theater. "Oh, come on, man, you can't just leave me," like he shouted after me when a theater rusher stomped up to her and yelled at him to leave. After 3 minutes, I re-entered the theater, and the creep was nowhere to be seen. I can't handle myself, but I felt violated by the whole incident. I went into the theater and sat next to this large man, but he had moved his seat away from me as the movie started. I was minding my own business and had no intention of looking at someone else in the movie theater besides the movie screen or my partner. As the scenes played out, I could hear him inhale creepily as if he was taking in a hit, and he would do it on the __up scenes. He was enjoying it. He would sometimes mumble yes a bunch of times and punch his other poem with satisfaction in the violent scenes. The individual's actions, sounds, and mumblings were very audible, not only to me but to the other people that were 4 to 5 seats away from him. And to top it all off, during the scene on the cop car, he took a loud deep breath in creepily and stretched and arched his back out for several seconds. He looked like he was getting off from the movie. You can't help not to be distracted from the movie and look in his direction when he's close to you and acting unusual while doing some weird noises. As if he were having an orgasm. I was creeped out and quickly left. As soon as the movie ended, the other pair that was next to him said they felt the same way when we got out from the theater. That was an experience, so why didn't I move or leave? Because I didn't really mind him that much, even though it was sometimes distracting. I found it kind of amusing. Up until the final quarter of the movie, where he was getting even weirder. The movie was getting really good. I decided to just finish the movie. I was in college when this happened and married. My husband had left for Air Force basic training, so I moved back to our hometown to live with his parents. We're from a smallish rural town, about 20,000-ish people. This all took place when Titanic was at the theater, and I was obsessed. I'd been fascinated by the story since I was a kid. As a kid, I'd read tons of books on it. The movie was a big deal to me. I saw it so many times that I'd run out of people willing to see it with me. So one night, I decided to just go alone. I got to the theater, got some snacks, and found a seat. It had been running for some time at this point, so it was not really crowded. I'm fairly certain this was a weeknight. I'm sitting by myself when this much older guy turns around and starts talking to me. He gave off a very creepy vibe, but I didn't want to be rude, so I did chit-chat with him for a minute. Then he asked if I would like to move up a row and sit with him. I politely said no. Then I became really nervous. He'd move back a row to sit with me. A couple just down the aisle from him were talking to one another, and they suddenly stood up and moved back to my row. They asked if they could sit next to me. I was so grateful to that woman. I watched the movie, and just before the end, I got up to leave. I wanted to get out ahead of that guy. But as I was walking to my car, I realized he was behind me. I hurried to my car. He stopped a few cars down and just stared at me. He then hurried to a car and got in. I pulled out and drove around a neighborhood for a while before heading into the country where my mother-in-law lived. I made sure he wasn't behind me. Before I drove home, I didn't want him to know where I lived. I didn't think much more about this until a few days later. I was leaving a department store at the mall with my grandmother. There was a crosswalk from the door to the parking lot. As we crossed, I looked up at the car that had slowed down for us, and it was the guy. I was stunned. I told myself it was simply because it was a smallish town. I tried to ignore it, and a few days after that I was at McDonald's, and as I came out, there was a car in the spot right outside the door. And it was the same guy staring at me. That was it. I told my in-laws. My father-in-law was very upset. He wanted me not to go out at night at all anymore, but that isn't practical. He started waiting up for me if I was out. Thankfully, I moved out shortly after my husband graduated basic, and he had to go to a tech school in a different state. I moved to live in the same town. We never moved back and have only been back to visit. I never saw that guy again. I sometimes wonder how it might have escalated had I not moved when I did. My family has a cabin in a tiny 150-resident hamlet in BC, and it's been a long-running tradition for everyone to stay in it all summer every year. Because we're there all the time, we generally know all of the locals minus the few people who rent out the cabins from the owners. One particular year, when I was freshly 18, I was out there with all of my favorite cousins. Since I was older, I normally took on the role of looking out for all the younger ones, especially the girls. After a late breakfast, we headed down to the beach, which was unusually crowded, since the hamlet was currently celebrating its town days, so there were hundreds of people from neighboring towns flocking in to party. At the time, most of the family went fishing, so I was there with just 3 girls. Brooke was the second oldest to me, being 12, then Emma at 11, and finally Rhea at 8. We sunbathed for a bit and made sandcastles, and finally we headed into the water to cool off. I'm kind of a wimp, so I took my sweet ass time getting into the water. After the I was about up to my butt when a guy walked up and started talking to me. He introduced himself as Shane and said he loved my tattoos and wanted to say something while we were on the beach, but he couldn't build the courage up until now. I thanked him and we made small talk. I found out he was only a couple of years older than me, and his family also has a cabin in town that they visit every summer. Strange, I spent the last 18 years of my life spending all 2.5 months of summer here, and I definitely didn't recognize him. I brushed it off. Maybe I had seen him, and he just had a crazy face-altering growth spurt that some of my own cousins had gone through. We continued talking, and I couldn't help but notice, and I got a really off vibe From him, eventually, my cousins waited over to see what was going on, and then he introduced himself. All 5 of us ended up spending a couple of hours just hanging out on the dock, chatting or playing Dark Wars, where everyone would fight to push each other off. I knew my grandparents would be starting dinner soon, so we said our goodbyes, and I walked back to the cabin with the 3 girls. Later that evening, I was sitting on the deck with the other adults and Raya and Emma. We heard a quad rolling down the front street, and Emma perked up saying, "Hey, it's Shane." I glanced up and noticed he slowed his yellow quad to a crawl when he passed the front gate. And then he sped off again. I asked if she was sure it was him, and she insisted it was. I immediately felt the iffy feeling I had about him intensify, because we never told or showed him which cabin was ours, so that meant there were 2 explanations, both equally unsettling. Number 1, he could have followed us back from the beach, which I know was entirely out of his way home, since he told me where his cabin was. And number 2, he could have been cruising around trying to spot which one we were in. Regardless, mission accomplished, he now knew. The next day, the same 3 cousins wanted to hike to the rope swing. It was about 3 miles down the Trans-Canada Trail that ran directly behind the cabin. I of course volunteered to take them. It sounded fun after all. We exited onto the trail through the backyard, and just as we're reaching the old trestle bridge, we see a yellow quad coming toward us. We move out of the way, and he stops in front of us, and I see it's Shane again. The typical "Hey, how you doing" happened. And before I could stop her, Rhea tells him we're going to the rope swing. I didn't want him to tag along after he went out of his way to find our cabin last night. Thankfully, he said he was heading into a bigger town just now, so we parted ways quickly. 20 minutes later, we are nearing the halfway mark of our journey. For probably the 30th time that day, we hear a quad coming up behind to pass us, so we move over. As soon as he passes, I see it's Shane on his yellow quad. Awesome, I guess he decided to join us after all. I'm not confrontational, so I smile and wave to be polite, and he responds by intentionally spinning his tires to spray us with loose gravel and dirt, and then he speeds off. The answer, Dick, my bad feeling about him shot way up. So we turned around and decided to just go to the beach instead. At this point, Brooke told me she didn't like him, and he gave her the creeps, whilst Rhea and Emma chimed in with, "Yeah, he's weird." I'm glad they already knew to listen to their instincts too. The next few days were uneventful. We only saw Shane in passing on his quad. But I no longer waved at him. After he pulled his gravel stunt, the 3 girls would always alert me and each other if they saw him, which I was thankful for, but he started acting a bit hostile. When he passed us, he would slow down and crawl past us, close enough to almost run over our feet. Then he would speed off whilst giving us the finger. Keep in mind, I was never rude to him. Everything seemed cool when we hung out the one time, and I kept my nicest face on despite being uneasy about his presence, yet he seemingly had some vendetta against me. Maybe I accidentally let on that I didn't want him to join us at the rope swing. I'll never know. About a week later, I was sitting on the deck reading when a group of the kids wanted to go to the general store for candy. I opted out this time. My book was getting really good, so my uncle took all 7 of them to get snacks, and I jokingly said, "Watch out for yellow quads." 15 minutes later, I hear kids yelling with a distinct voice of my uncle, and they run up the driveway saying, "Shane tried to run us over." What the answer? I asked what happened, and my uncle tells me that while they were leaving the general store, he had spotted the familiar kids and apparently made a beeline for all of them. Speeding up, my uncle stood between the quad and the group, and Shayna turned away at the last second, missing them by inches. Immediately, all the adults were in a rage, asking who this guy was and why he'd do that. The 4 of us gave the lowdown on him, and they told us to avoid him. We discussed reporting it since it was bordering on violence, but we decided not to, for a couple of reasons. Number 1, other than his first name, I had absolutely zero information about him, and number 2, in a small hamlet 1 hour away from the nearest town with emergency services, cops were very few and far between. My grandpa said it was unlikely they'd even consider it worth their time, so we dropped it. The rest of the trip was great. No one saw Shane again for the remaining days. I thought the weirdness was over, but unfortunately I was wrong. Because of circumstances out of my control, I wasn't able to go back to the cabin the next year. The following September, we had a big family dinner, which was the first time I got to see some of the cousins in a year. Partway through the night Emma and Brooke run up to me and they say they saw Shane a lot again that summer. My stomach dropped. I asked him if he kept up his usual antics. Unfortunately, he had. Since I wasn't there, I guess he switched his main focus to Brock. Thankfully, they were smart girls, so they kept avoiding him, even going on missions. As they called it, communicating by walkie-talkies to make sure he wasn't around whenever they went anywhere. It honestly made me sad to hear that these kids had their fun, carefree summer tainted by having to watch out for an _ on a yellow quad every day. I couldn't believe he was still bothering them. They said they had a couple more close calls of him speeding toward them, but he never got more than a foot away before turning back around. I asked their parents if this was true, as they were as uneasy as me, saying he would prowl back and forth in front of the cabin in the evenings to the point where they had to yell at him to off. I've been back for the summer getaways, off and on since then, but I hadn't had any more encounters with Shane. I haven't even seen the familiar yellow quad, which makes me think he hasn't been back at all. Brooke, Emma, and Rhea continue to make little jokes here and there like don't let Shane get you when people leave the cabin, but otherwise the whole ordeal has been mostly forgotten. As much as I hate the fact that those innocent little girls got caught up in it, I also know it was a great lesson to them to trust your intuition about people and be wary of strangers, especially the ones that follow you home and try to run you over. So Shane, if you end up seeing me at the beach again, do me a favor and stay far away from me, and especially stay the away from my family. Music. This event happened to me spring 2015. So I'm a young adult male living in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. I joined a fairly popular BDSM website mid-January. I was instantly drawn into the community. For those of you who don't know, BDSM is a variety of erotic practices involving bondage, dominance, submission, and masochism. Think 50 Shades of Grey. If that helps. The community welcomes all kinds of kinks and fetishes alike, and everyone I've ever met from that site I have been very welcoming and friendly, except for one. It all started with me coming across her profile. She was a gorgeous woman, very fit with long legs and a great chest. She was an older woman, but I was into that. I started by browsing her collection of photos, mostly fairly vanilla images of her sitting at a dining room table, drinking a glass of wine and smiling at the camera. Real classy, which just urged me forward. I went ahead and messaged her. I wrote the usual greetings and offered to chat and get to know each other. She replied almost instantly. She greeted me as sir. Given the role I take, we continue to message back and forth. For a week or two, she explained to me that she wanted me to be her master since her last master died in a car accident. This was odd to me, but unfortunate accidents can happen to anyone, right? She continued giving me details of what she wanted me to do to her, and I very much obliged. The next couple of days we kept trying to meet up for a coffee, but unfortunately she had to cancel last minute each time. Eventually I began getting very eager, as all the kinky discussions have gotten me worked up, so to speak. So late one night she messaged me inviting me over to her place. She explained to me that she doesn't work in the morning, so we can be up all night having our fun. Well, being so worked up and lacking the necessary blood flow to my brain to make an educated decision, I agreed and asked for her address. She messaged me an address along with the phone number she said was her home line. I got ready to head out, so I got into my car and plugged the address into my GPS. This is where I noticed she lived in Hamilton. It's about 45 minutes away from Toronto. It's currently 1 a.m., but this didn't bother me as I drove to Hamilton quite often, and considering I'd be spending the night, I could just leave in the morning. 45 minutes later, I found myself passing Hamilton. Okay, so it's a little further than that, no big deal, but then I reached a stretch of highway void of streetlights. This is where I start to get concerned, as I only had my own headlights lighting my way. Suddenly my GPS chimed in with a female voice indicating my exit. It was coming up on the right, and I feared driving into the darkness of the mild comfort of the highway. The exit took me into a long dark stretch of country road. My red lights started going off as I passed silhouettes of farmhouses in forestry, a good distance between each of them. My GPS chimed again, indicating that my destination was coming up on my left. But as I approached my location, it was not even close to what I expected. It was a small church house with one yellow streetlight illuminating the dirt lot in front of it. I pulled into the lot and took a closer look with my vehicle's headlights pointing at the building. The windows and door were boarded up, and definitely not recently, as the wood seemed weather-worn. My blood began to run cold as I made sure my doors were locked and my windows rolled up. The full tank of gas gave me some kind of comfort in the situation. I figured she possibly made an error in typing out her address. I called the number she gave me. Music. The number you were trying to reach is no longer in service. Okay, at this point I'm ready to turn and leave until I notice my phone alerting me that I have an email, and it was a message from her. Hey, I see you're here. It's not the church. My place is the small house behind the church. All I could do is replay all the horror movies I've seen throughout my life. I just couldn't believe I could possibly be living one out in real life. However, a small jolt of curiosity persuaded me forward, even if just to take a look at this house. There was a small path beside the church, and I slowly pulled up into it. As I crept forward in my car, on a small little farmhouse poked itself out of the trees at the top of the hill. At this point, I was certain I'm not going in there. I've made the decision in my head that my own survival took precedency over my need for sex. I was about to reverse out of there until I saw the upstairs balcony door open. A hooded figure stepped out. I couldn't see their face, but I could tell by the posture and shape that it was a man. Despite the darkness of his facial features, I could feel he was looking directly at me. He stood there for about 30 seconds before he motioned his head in a way I recognized as the universal sign for "look behind you." Just then I felt a metal handle on the outside of my driver door being tugged, and I quickly turned my head in that direction to see the woman from the profile photos hunched over and pressing her face up against the window. My heart leapt out of my chest as I stared at her horrifying smile. The best way I can describe her expression would be any creepy cartoon image of the Joker you've ever seen. It was undoubtedly her behind that insane grin, only much older. She whispered through the glass, "Open the door, baby." I was frozen in my seat, unsure of how to respond or what to do next, so I just sat there, continuing to stare at her like an idiot. Her face then quickly fell into an angry, malicious expression as she continued to violently jiggle at the door handle. She then yelled at the top of her lungs, "Open the door now!" This knocked me into panic mode, and I pressed my foot to the gas. My car, set to reverse, began to pull out of the pathway backwards. The woman tried holding on to the door handle, only to let go after being dragged off of her feet. I flew down the dark road back toward the highway, almost triple the speed limit, just in case they had a car themselves, and decided to chase me. I called a friend of mine who I also met on the same website. She lived in Hamilton and insisted I come stay the night at her place. When I got there, she poured me a cold glass of Coke Zero. As I explained to her what had happened, she told me that she read an article in the local paper over a week ago in regards to an older couple luring men out to their farm. I stopped her right there, as I didn't want to be freaked out even more than I currently was. So it was summer 2012. I just quit my job working for a clinic. Because the owner was a psycho, I was pretty upset, and I was living in the downtown core of Toronto. I was really worried because I didn't have a backup plan, so I was desperately shooting out resumes everywhere, hoping I could find something fast. I get a call 2 weeks later for an interview. Some company called Ontario Consumers. They sell water heaters, but I'd mostly done secretarial and admin work in the past. So I was under the impression that the position I applied for was of that nature. Maybe it was for an admin job at their office. The interview goes well and I'm hired. I'm ecstatic and promptly call my parents to let them know I got a job. I still didn't really know what the job was, for I was just so happy I had a job and could continue to afford living in my apartment. The next morning at 9:00 a.m. I go through a training course. The videos we watch are about water heaters and why they need to be maintained. They kind of hint that it's a sales position, but everything about it started to feel a bit weird to me. Something about the people who worked there seemed a bit off. I was introduced to my team lead, who took me and a group of 5 20-something-year-old guys into a work van. I'm given a uniform, a stupid gray shirt that says Ontario Consumers, and a baseball cap. We are driven to another building, and it's packed full of other employees. In front of us are PlayStation 3s, flat screen Sony TVs, iPads, top quality home appliances, and other various brand new electronics. A guy starts off the meeting, "Hey, everybody, are you having a great day?" And everyone around me screams. Yes, I'm starting to feel weird. Everyone looks unsettlingly happy almost. Too happy at the meeting, we're told how wonderful we are, and if we work hard, all of our dreams will come true, yada yada, we can have anything we want, the new TV, the new washer and dryer set, all that stuff, but only if we stay positive and work hard. I felt like I was sitting through a cold sermon. I wanted to leave, but I decided to stay. Because I needed to have a job. We're told about various success stories of other employees and how working for Ontario Consumers was the best job they ever had. After the meeting, myself, the team lead, and the 5 other guys are all taken down to Subway for lunch. The guys are being super nice to me and tell me I'll do great. Everyone keeps emphasizing don't stop smiling and always stay positive. I feel unwell. Something isn't right about these folks. We get into the van and drive to some random North York neighborhood in Toronto. I leave my purse and belongings in the car, as does everybody else. The boys all go off on their own, and I'm told I'm shadowing the team lead for the day. The guy was so nice. Too nice, it made me feel uncomfortable. He smiled like he was deranged in some way. We go door to door trying to get people to update the water heaters. His tactics are vile, though he doesn't outright say it to homeowners, but he acts like we've been sent by Enbridge. He says, "Hi, I'm from Ontario Consumers. We were sent to check your water heater to make sure it's up to date and complies with the industry standards. Do I take my shoes off here or leave them on?" He did this over and over again to homeowners who were seniors and homeowners who didn't speak English. They were signing a contract for new water heaters without their knowledge, thinking that they were just signing some paperwork confirming that someone had checked the boiler. When I asked if we were scamming these people, his face went from happy to outright scary. He looked at me like I'd committed some heinous crime. "Don't you ever say that to me again. We are not scamming people." The look on his face really frightened me. I was stuck with him alone. For a while we walked house to house in silence. Some of the house's owners that opened the door seemed to be housewives. My team lead always made an effort to flirt with them, and they loved it. The more he flirted with them, the less they paid attention to what they were signing. We walked for hours in the hot summer. Part 3. Son, I kept asking him when we got to go home, and he just said, "It depends." I felt like I was in that Goosebumps book where the kids are made to trick or treat on Halloween for hours and hours by some aliens not being allowed to stop. Have to hit every house. It's been hours now that we've been outside. I ask him what time it is. He tells me it's 10:10. I freak and say I have a date in an hour. I'm gonna be late. I had no idea this job required you to work so late. I was only shadowing, so it wasn't a real work shift for me. I asked if I could get my back out of the car and just TTC at home. The team lead said no. My phone is in the van, so I can't even text my date that I'm gonna be very late. The team lead says we have to leave together at 11. He takes me back to the van and we start driving around to find the other guys. We found them and they all pile into the van as well. The team lead says he feels bad about my date. He says he'll drop me off at home. I was in such a hurry, so I agree. When I get to my building, he steps outside with me and says, "I like you. I want you to work for my team, and I think you'll be a good asset." I'm in such a rush, I just quickly agree that I'll be back in the morning for my next shift. Big mistake. I go out for my date, have a wonderful evening, and then wake up the next morning for work. The job sucked. The hours were long, walking around with no breaks in the humidity. I guess I agreed to come back because I thought I could work this shitty job in the meantime, then keep sending out resumes and grab the next best job opportunity that comes my way. Day 2 was a bigger nightmare and actually quite scary for me. We went to this morning cult-like pet talk again, grabbed lunch, and then head out for another neighborhood. This time we were around the Dundas West area. We also had a new team member with us. He was pretty quiet, and like me, he seemed uncomfortable too. This team lead says he will spend 3 hours with me going door to door, and then I'm on my own. This neighborhood had a lot of creepy old-looking homes. The team lead had me trying to push my way into people's homes aggressively. Even still, after I found out it was a commission-based position and my team lead relied on me to make him money. The more recruits, the more money he was getting. Upset because I was too shy and not trying hard enough to make people sign contracts. At one point we go into a house. The owner seems nice, but as soon as he closes the door with us inside, he pulls out his cell phone and starts filming us. "I know what you're up to. You're the scum of the earth. I work for the Toronto Star and I know all about your scamming operation." I try covering my face and begin tearing up. This situation was getting out of control. The guy uttered some more threats at me, saying he'd share the video everywhere. and actually threatened to physically harm my team lead. I saw my chance and bolted out of the door. The team lead followed behind me. The man yelled at us if we ever stepped on his property again, he'd call the cops. One of these neighbors was on their porch and he screamed at them, "Don't trust these little shits, they're going to rip you off." My heart was pounding. My team lead suggested we walked farther down the street before we start again. We did a few more houses together and then he told me I was good to go off by myself. I'm really shy and sensitive, and the idea of having to go into people's homes on my own frightened me. Also, in my experience, most boilers are in people's basements. Every house I entered, my heart was pounding. I was so thankful when a little old lady would open her door. I'd explain why I was there, go to the basement, and because I didn't want to scam people, I would just look at the boiler's last inspection date and say, "Okay, ma'am, looks like your boiler is just fine," and I would run out of there. I went into one guy's house, and he was home alone. He stood so close to me the entire time. I didn't like how close he was to me, and he kept touching my shoulders and the small of my back. You better believe I got out of there fast. At the end of the day, I came back to the van. I didn't sell a single boiler, and I'm glad. The team lead, however, was not. He said I lacked a positive attitude and enthusiasm. The guys got into the van and we started to drive away when I looked in the back of the van and saw the other new guy was missing. I informed the team lead, and he acted like he just didn't care. I saw the guy left his sunglasses, a book, and his cell phone behind, and we knew we needed to drive around to find him. We drove around a total of 5 minutes, and then the team lead said, "I guess he went home. Let's get out of here and go home too." I complained, "We barely looked. He's got to be around here somewhere." The team lead ignored me and drove us back to the office. As soon as we get there, I left as quickly as I could and went home. I got into bed and called my parents. I told him about my day and how upset I was by the job. It really drained my energy. I felt like I had to be on high alert all the time in people's creepy basements. When I told my dad about being in basements alone, he demands I quit. I told him I had already planned to 2 days of this garbage was enough for me. I go to sleep feeling thankful the day is over. The next morning, around the time I should have gone to work, I called the team lead. "Hey Brad. Hi, where are you? We're about to start." "Yeah, I'm not coming in." "After how yesterday went?" "I quit." "What do you mean you quit?" "I just didn't feel comfortable yesterday after that guy filmed us and then me being sent into basements. Alone in homes of people I don't know. It's not safe." "Oh, __. The job is safe. There are plenty of other girls doing this job. So what if something did happen to me and I didn't show up to the van at the end of the night? Would you have left me behind like the other guy last night?" "Stop acting like that and don't let this team down. I'm really disappointed in you. I thought you had potential." "No, I'm done. I don't feel safe, and you don't care about the well-being of your team." "You brat." I hung up the phone and never went back. So team lead and the rest of Ontario consumers, you can __, write off. Multi-level marketing jobs are the worst. This happened about 3 years ago when me and my wife got married in June. I'll never be so grateful that I have a habit of locking doors. Our wedding day was coming to an end. Family and friends were slowly starting to depart as me and my wife Diana took pictures and chatted with some of the guests who stayed a little longer and were just having a good time. It was a great day and a lot of fun memories were made, but what was least expected is what happened that night as we were on our way to our honeymoon. As me and Diana said goodbye to the last of our guests, we got into our car and headed home. We had our bags packed prior to the wedding day for Cancun, and we were ready to go. I live in Washington, and we were in a bit of a hurry because instead of flying out from the Seattle airport in SeaTac like normal people do, it was a lot cheaper for us to drive up north to Canada and fly out from a Canadian airport. Me and my wife thought it'd be fun to have a little road trip to Canada and then fly out from Canada to Cancun. Plus, it was only a 3.5-hour drive for us and cheaper, so we headed out at midnight. We had a great time driving, blasting music, talking about Cancun, and just being excited about the new chapter in our life. Diana slowly started to fall asleep. Being exhausted from the wedding and whatnot, we were halfway to Canada. At this point, we were no longer in city area, but more a wooded area with fewer cars and fewer people. The more we drove, practically seeing no one on the road. By that time, it was around 3 a.m. We had some extra time on our hands, and I was starting to fall asleep too, so I pulled over to a gas station to get some Red Bull to keep me awake. I pulled into the gas station that was completely empty and parked the car too. See Diana asleep, I told her I'm taking the case and locking her inside and then I'd be back. I'm not sure if she could hear me, but she kind of motioned her hand around like people normally do when they're too tired to care. I came back around 6 minutes later to find my wife shaking and crying. I was confused and freaking out a bit because I wasn't sure why she was crying. She couldn't even get words out at first. Later, once she calmed down, she told me this. Apparently she did hear me when I told her I'd take the case and be right back. As she was sleeping, she was awoken by a tapping on the driver's side window. Being too tired to get up or even open her eyes, she lazily went for the unlock button on the passenger side door. As she was going for it, she froze. Her thought passed her mind, then she remembered, didn't he say he had the keys? Why would he need me to unlock the door for him? That's when she heard a woman's voice mumbling from the driver's side. She turned herself around to look at the window and saw a woman. She had long black hair with wide eyes and a crooked smile on her face. She couldn't hear what she was saying at first, but then she heard what she was saying. She kept repeating in a mumbled tone, "Are you tired?" over and over. She freaked out and told the woman to leave her alone. The woman laughed and told my wife that she was tired too. The woman never took eyes off of her and tried the door handle. At this point my wife was close to tears and attempted to call me, but as she did, she heard what sounded like a phone buzz and realized I left my phone in the car. Out of options, my wife started to honk the horn, trying to scare the woman off, while also maybe getting my attention. The woman still had her gaze on her and started mumbling more while laughing and trying the door handle again. Then she mentioned something about someone named Sarah. She asked my wife if she knew her. After a few more minutes of mumbling, she laughed to my wife's words. The minute she left, I came out at the gas station. My wife then broke down. I don't know how I didn't hear the honking of the car, and I still feel bad for leaving my phone in the car. My wife also added that one of the creepier things about the woman is that she didn't look homeless or dirty or anything. In fact, she seemed normal and well kept. My wife said she'll never forget the woman's wide eyes and the gaze she had on her with that smile. It also chills me to think of what would have happened if my wife never realized that I had the keys, or if she never heard me about locking her inside and opened the door while faced the other way. I don't know what those women's intentions were, but if I couldn't hear the honk of a horn, I'm not so sure I'd have heard her scream to this day. I'm thankful I have a good habit of locking doors, and I'd recommend it no matter how long you're going to be gone. About 10 years ago, I used to live in a tiny town. It had a really small population, maybe 3,000 people max. Everyone knew who everyone was, or at least most. At 16 to 17, the owner of our local bar would let me get in. He knew who I was because I saw him often where I worked, and he didn't care that I was underage. It would have been a matter of months until I could legally go in anyway. So one night I go out with my sister and her friends. I noticed a guy in his 40s looking at me from afar. My sister tells me he used to be her history teacher, Mr. Tony. He quit the year he was supposed to teach me, so he was never my teacher. I figured he was staring at me because he wanted to know if I was one of his old students or whatever. He never talked to me, my sister, her friends, and I enjoyed our night out. Once I got home from the bar, I see that I have a friend request on Facebook from the teacher. I accept without any second thoughts. I never would have guessed this guy could be a weirdo. Mr. Tony starts talking to me, asking me what I do, where I work, and if I'm from out of town, since he's never seen me. I tell him no, but he never met me because he left the school the year I would have been in his class. That was an okay talk, but still weird, because I was talking to an older guy at 2 a.m. There was no flirting at all. He then says he had something weird to tell me. He messaged me, "You know, the night before this one, I had a dream there was one of my Native American friends giving me a feather in my hands saying, 'Set her free. Set her free. When I saw you tonight and saw your feather tattoo on your arm, I knew it was meant to be. You want to come over sometime and drink some wine?' First thing I did was tell him right away I was underage, that I was sorry that me being out at a bar misled him. I thanked him for his offer, but declined. Of course, he still tried to chat, but I was exhausted and extremely creeped out. For a few days following that night, he still tried to talk to me, but I never answered. One day, he wrote me that he came to my workplace and he didn't see me, and he was disappointed because he hoped he would see me. I did not answer, and I blocked him. A few months after that, there was a big event at a local beach for Canada Day. It was open for people of every age, so I went with my friend. We were sitting at a table behind a canteen, and there was no one around us. I noticed Mr. Tony with another guy walking in our direction. He was drunk and really excited about seeing me. His friend starts talking to the girl I was with, and Mr. Tony does the same with me. I tell him right away to leave me alone and start to walk away from the table I was at. As I began walking, I turn around and notice he's following me, but my friend didn't notice that I was walking away. I started walking back to her when he stops me. I was blocked by him. Behind me was the canteen. He asked me to kiss him. I told him no. He asked again. I screamed something at him about me being underage, still only at 17. At this point my back was literally leaning on the canteen wall. He was uncomfortably close to me. He took his hands, put them on my shoulders, and continues to try and convince me. I got really mad and disgusted. I pushed him and ran to my friend, who was finally starting to realize that something was wrong. We ran away and lost Mr. Tony and his friend. We called my friend's mom to pick us up, and we told her what had happened. She got to the beach as fast as she could. A few minutes later, as I was about to get into the car, I saw him coming toward me, saying he still wanted to chat. I told him to off. I never saw him after that and almost forgot about this story. Luckily, he never worked again in a school. I was living in a city in Canada, born and raised there. I had to walk about a block and a half to my bus stop every morning, where on a typical day my friends Casey and Emily would be. On occasion we would get the guys that would miss their bus and walk to our stop instead, since it was the closest to the school and the last bus stop of the morning. One of the guys that would show up on occasion was a guy named Ron, and sometimes his friend Tim. Ron took a liking to me immediately and started showing up to my stop every day. I didn't have a very long walk home from the bus stop, but I started feeling really uncomfortable. I changed it up and started walking home from school instead. The problem with this was that the most direct route led straight through the woods. Seniors used to go into them and party a lot, which you could tell by the large amount of beer bottles and beer cans all over the forest. One day while walking through the woods, I hear twigs snapping behind me. I thought it was a deer at first and kept going. The snapping continued and got closer. I looked back. The twigs stopped snapping and no one was there. I started running. Instead, I made it home and locked my front door. I kept my parents in the loop for the entirety of this ordeal, so they were quite aware of what was going on. The next day, I decided to take the bus again. Ron shows up at my stop again, and I try to ignore him. He gets on the bus and sits directly behind me. I finally snapped and yelled, "Look, Ron, I have a boyfriend. Please leave me alone." He asks what his name is, and I lie. The first name I could think of was Paul. Unfortunately, there was a Paul at my bus stop. I came home, and everything seems fine. The next morning, I start walking to the bus and see Ron and Tim there cornering Paul with a hunting knife. I started to run, but Ron caught up to me. He held me down, putting the knife against my throat. I must have had angels looking out for me, because the bus rounded the corner as soon as he did that. He let me up and started walking back to the bus stop. I ran for my house again, except this time I was successful. I immediately told my mom, and she called the police. They took a statement from Paul at the school, and me had my house. They searched both lockers of Ron and Tim, and they were both expelled. Because a piece of paper is meaningless, my mom insisted I spend a year in the States with my aunt, which I did. I still feel really uncomfortable walking anywhere by myself to this day. Hey guys, I hope you're doing well and enjoyed the video. If you don't mind, hit the like button and subscribe. Drop me a comment and let me know what you thought of the stories. Oh, and don't forget to hit the bell icon to turn on notifications if you fancy checking out the perks of my Patreon or channel memberships, or want to get involved on social media. All my links are down below. I want to give a shout out to my patrons and channel members for supporting the channel, so a huge thanks to Patricia, Krista, Amber, Mr. Backwoods, C. Brenda, Sharon, and Ashley Absinthe, Alice, Arton Gaming, Sarah P. Pretty Girl 215, Christy Crafty Cow Something Edgy, Borderline Betty Spiders, Web Oalala Andrea, Lady Drackard, Sue Monique, Sean Gorman, Casey, Linda, Austin, Tegan, Chris, and Donna, Lil Smart, Jennifer, Gabrielle, Misanthropia, Ryan, Rudy, Christina, Della, Rosa Noosh, Fire 05, Jody, Kathleen, Fenton, James, Gargano, Gemma, Alan, Monica, Lavelles, Alex, and Courtney Maxwell. Thank you very much for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you all on the next one.
You